Howdy, all you people out there. This is a first time presentation by Charles Smith from West Orange, Texas. And howdy there from Texas. I am trying to make my first video, and I would probably have a little gift of gab before I can get into the serious part of it. I have been working for the last 3 years producing my first ebook, and it is labeled as what the name of the ebook is the same as my website name, which is Truth and Justice Charles.com. It's been out maybe on the net for probably around a year. I don't know that anybody has ever read it yet. That's why I decided to maybe make a video and get some people interested in understanding what my purpose for the ebook was. I was always interested in the injustice in what is called the justice system, which is really a commercial system because it deals only in bonds in the background. There nothing goes on in the courthouse that has to do with the justice system. We have no justice system. And so I've learned from years that it just bothers me. And that was primarily what I was going to start talking about. But I kept procrastinating until COVID came out. That's when I told myself, Charlie I'm called, you've got to start the book now. Because I had read the book called The Invisible Rainbow, which indicated that 1/3 of the people in this world died from the Spanish flu, which was caused by the electrical magnetic frequency poisoning of the cells of those people within the field of the telegraph system that was invented. They had wires strung from housetop to housetop and along the railroad tracks. Those people died. They could never get someone that had this flu to give it to someone else. So therefore, our government, that would be the government of the United States, the government of the world, everywhere, because the governments of all the countries are the same. They are part of the what's called the matrix. That also includes all corporations that are existing only on paper. They are fictitious. They're not real. They're not true. That's why we have no truth and no justice. We have lies and deception. And they control the world, this matrix, through lies and deception. There's no place for truth and justice to exist with lies and deception. The same with light and darkness. There's no place that light and darkness can both be together in the same space at the same time. So I've learned a lot during writing this book, or compiling a lot of videos, which you may call plagiarism, but these videos were made by people who had the same idea I did. Some in the health field, some in science, some in government, some in the church. Every field of endeavor that we experience on this earth is controlled by this matrix. So, when I was married into the church, I asked questions like, why did the church in the Crusades kill the Christians? And I was told, oh, well, those were Gnostic Christians. They didn't go along with our doctrine. Since then, I've understood that doctrine means to indoctrinate people. And I labeled this, we're being poisoned in this truthful society by a poison called DDT, doctrine, dogma, and tradition. All of those, our doctrines, our dogmas, and our traditions, are all fictitious. They have to be. In order to rule, everything has to be fictitious. That's why the sun has to be 93 million miles away, circling the earth. That's a hard one to believe, and I never really believed that, but I just consented to it, like we all do. The science of my book is in chapter 5. The beginning of the situation we're in continued all the way, covering all the way to the part where we are actually not people. People are the souls that are incarnated into the flesh. That's us. We are a soul. We're not the flesh who has a soul. And it makes a big difference because the soul is not able to be destroyed. It is always and will always be. And when this flesh dies, the soul does not die. We're still conscious. We're in a state of consciousness in this world. Consciousness is like air. Everything is involved in consciousness. Every mineral, plant, animal is all conscious with a soul. This is hard to understand. And when people start reading the book that explains how we are programmed through our subconscious mind, which knows not the difference between truth and justice, truth and lies, good or bad. So the whole idea was to bring truth in. And I started out there with how we are programmed, how our ego is part of our subconscious mind. And we're programmed through subliminal messages, advertisements. We can even program ourselves. That's advertised, and that we can do that. But you have to kind of be careful because you may program yourself to do something that you think you will always want to do, but later on you may change your mind and forget you've programmed yourself. And what happens then if we can't go against our program? Our ego is part of the subconscious mind. It's full of thoughts that we've had, and words that have come out from those thoughts that coincide with the thoughts in our mind, which are compiled in the ego, and it is programmed. You might say conditioned. We condition our animals, and we program our animals. We learn to do everything that they have done to us, which sometimes isn't very humane, you might say. So back to this, back to the Spanish flu. The governments all know that there is no such thing as a virus. I had read The Invisible Rainbow whenever the COVID came out, and I knew what killed those people and that there's no such thing as a virus. But in that book, I took parts of that book and printed it in the book that I produced that explains what all has happened from our frequencies, from man-made frequencies on this earth. They've destroyed life, the lives of the plants and animals that exist in the national forests. They keep count. And every time a new tower goes up on a mountain range in a national forest, birds leave, animals start dying. We've lost probably 40 or more percent of our animals since all of this frequency, man-made frequency, which was decided way back when there was the discussion, should we be working with AC or DC? Well, AC won. That was the matrix plan. So the next thing that I brought out in the book was the subconscious mind, the ego. And I brought in some Buddhist monk and another monk from another religion. And they talked about the rite of passage for young kids. They had to kill their ego, lose their identity, not identify themselves with other things or other people, not to feel different, that we're all the same, that we all love each other. But the Matrix has changed all that. They put fear in our hearts. The next thing that I talked about was the manifestation. The book of John in the Bible, which was tampered with by the Matrix, indicated that Jesus said, if you want that mountain to move, speak to it in my name, and my Father who is in heaven will move that mountain for you. But recently, they found the book of Thomas, which had been lost. And it coincided with the Buddhist and all the other religions in the East, that it is the frequency of the heart. We all produce an aura of frequency. And the frequency of the heart, when it matches another item, hardware, a mountain, a wall, it will essentially remove that wall. That's what happened with the Battle of Jericho. Those people's hearts were emotionally controlled by their thoughts of wanting those walls to come down. And so they thought them. The connection between the mind, the thought in your conscious mind, not your subconscious mind, and the feeling, the emotion in your heart, when they are one, that's when you have control over matter. And so the Matrix, which actually came into being eons ago, but they only came into this part of our world when the church was brought in. They brought the church in Rome. It was Constantine that had his armies, and they got together with Constantine to control the world. He had the armies, and they had control of our soul, because we consented that we were not a soul, we are a body. So it gets into the legal system, which is maritime, because the church has to be fictional. And so maritime law is fiction. The law of the sea is fiction. That's why it's maritime. The captain is the law. But on land, it's the law of the land. So it turns out that I lost my train of thought. It turns out that the laws that are maritime do not have authority over us. We are at birth, every person, even the people working for the matrix, all are born with as a soul, as a sovereign soul. Nothing can take away our sovereignty. That is the thing that eventually, after producing this book and trying to bring all the truths about all the legalese and all the different ways that they deceive us and control us, starting with the birth certificate, because they put our name in all capital letters. The mother give birth to a bastard child because they wanted her maiden name on the birth certificate. They cared not about the father's name, but they wanted her maiden name so they could say that the baby is a ward of the church. They're not sovereign, and therefore that made the matrix sovereign. Their whole scheme began when they were in Egypt. They came up with the idea to put themselves in between the people and a God. It turns out they created the Trinity. It worked real well. They were in the city of Ur in the Mesopotamia. They were controlling people this way with this tradition, this doctrine, and it disturbed a lot of people on the mainland. So they essentially went around their protective wall and destroyed or ran them away. And what they did was they went to Rome, where they would have the armies of Emperor Constantine, and they got together and they created their system of law, controlling everything. So that's where we are today. We've always been fighting to figure out how to overcome the Matrix. They've even made movie, The Matrix. And you take the red pill or the blue pill and so forth, and you consent or you don't consent. Well, it turns out that the Matrix were the fallen watchers in the Bible. They were essentially here on earth to be the spiritual guides for the spirits who decided to go through the school of earth to learn lessons to ascend in their spirituality. The only way you can learn a lesson is to have a flesh that experiences pain and happiness, that you've passed your test or you've lost it. So they were our spiritual advisors. I now have spiritual advisors. I have a guardian angel. There is a source of all of us. We call it the source of the universe, or spirit, or soul, whatever. But we don't call it God. But for people who call God the manufacturer of all of us and still live according to their conscience, they're in good standing. because it is just understood that they're misled. And I said conscience. I have found recently 37 verses in the Bible that I included it in this blog that I'm talking about that state it is our conscience that convicts us or saves us. That means something within us, in our heart. Everything is directed into our heart. We are the manifestors. We are also creators. We're part of the source. We're all together, united. The church doesn't want us united. That's why they had two men, Luther and Calvin, separate themselves from the church. Put a poster on the wall. We're against you. We're going to start our own church. I think they were Jesuits. Whatever happened was they created two churches which split and split and split until we have almost 30,000 churches today. They're in name are united, but not in spirit. Everybody in each one of those churches is very comfortable there with their doctrine and with their God and with their vows, and they're comfortable. That's it. And they're taught to manifest. They don't manifest speaking in Jesus' name. Jesus and Buddha and all these different people in these 14 or 15 different religions were essentially mentors in spirit. They're still here. Two of the people that I copy from in their videos are called channels or tarot card readers. And a couple of them channel St. Michael the Archangel. And we get to understand what St. Michael thinks about this. We also get to understand by another reader called Solara. Her advisors advised her to post her video about the beginning of the Matrix, the Fallen Watchers. It's about a 30-minute video. They decided they would incarnate themselves and take possession of the whole earth, everything. And they've done a good job. As Solara says, they've made a good run. But, you know, it's about the end times now. We're coming into the age of Aquarius. And each phase of the earth lasts about 25,000 years. And we're coming to a phase shift to 5D frequency. The whole idea is for us to ascend to that frequency, a higher frequency. Our lower frequency is satisfying our desires, our needs, and we have nerve endings going to different parts of our body called chakras, and they all produce a different frequency. The Bible was created as a teaching system for children and for a system to understand how the constellations in our cosmos affect us. They are energy. We are energy. When certain constellations or planets line up with each other, there's different endings, different emotions for different people who are born under different signs of the zodiac. The church doesn't care for us to get involved in all that understanding. They told us that most churches tell you that it's a portal to hell to be involved with the constellations and the zodiac signs. But, you know, they didn't take everything out of the Bible. They had to leave some things in. like the word Mazaroth. When God told Jacob, not Jacob, but Job, he says, do you know your Mazaroth? That means zodiac. So in this blog, I have one man, or maybe two of his videos, that show how everything in the Bible is directed toward the signs of the zodiac. Everything. And the words that are used and the people involved. But they made a history book out of it. That's their doctrine. And these characters are these people that were spiritual advisors and mentors, and some of them actually lived. I think St. Michael did, but I'm not sure. He does. He knows. But anyway, so what happens is the matrix is under the original spiritual laws, which they hid from us. We don't know the spiritual laws. We know they're man-made laws, the laws from Moses and those who developed our Constitution and all the stuff that limit our rights and our identity. Everything has been done to take away our identity. So the next thing I talked about was the earth. We don't live on a globe. Sorry to tell you that. When I would go around with the people in the church to different abortion clinics, praying from Missouri up to New York, Washington, D.C., Louisiana mostly, and here in Texas, that we were there trying to prevent abortion. How did they allow that? Words. Abortion does not mean to abort a baby. Murder does. But you call it abortion, it soothes everyone's conscience. Because it's not murder, it's an abortion that's necessary. Well, some murders are necessary according to some people. So I would talking to some of the people that are always there with us. They're sort of like priests. They don't marry. And I said to one of them, you know, we could stop all of this abortion stuff if we could just convince everyone that the earth is flat and there is a dome over it like it says in the Bible. They did not like that. They did not want to discuss it because it is the church, the Jesuits, who came up with the whole thing. Copernicus with the globe, his theory. Newton, his theory of gravity. There is no gravity. We're either buoyant or we're not buoyant in the air or the water that we are inhabiting. You can't have two physical laws of gravity and buoyancy working against each other. And then we had Galileo. He told us what everything looked like outside the dome. And then we had Lemaitre, who's the bishop who came up, the Jesuit bishop who came up with the Big Bang Theory. So they've been protecting that. They allow us to have debates over religion. They allow us to have debates over the law, the politics. But they don't like to get involved with the globe because it's the only controversy that can be settled logically and physically. So our Navy in 1958 measured the distance between the ice on the Antarctic to the dome which was 13,000 feet, a little over 2 miles. The distance from the North Pole to the dome was 77 miles. And since God put the larger and lesser luminaries in the firmament, that puts the sun and the moon local within 77 miles when they're directly above us. They could get further away as they travel away from us. The sun doesn't set, it just goes away. We see with eyes that have cones and rods. And when you look at a highway and all the telephone poles come together and they get shorter and shorter, the land comes up, the sky comes down, the sides come together, and we're like looking through a megaphone. That's the way we see. So when you see a ship going over the edge and you don't see the bottom of it anymore, all it takes is a pair of binoculars, and there is the bottom again. People took a picture of Chicago from across Lake Michigan, which was 60 or so miles, I don't know. But you should not be able to see even the tops of the buildings if the curve was there. Some people took a picture across the lake, sent it into a weatherman, part of the Matrix, and he says, well, that's easy to explain. That's a mirage. So they have an answer for everything. And we consent because they're going according to the spiritual law that says you can not do harm to anyone unless you have their consent. We don't know that law. So they tell us they show us pictures of things like the Simpsons, the buildings coming down in New York, wars, pandemics, everything that's ever happened to us to keep the population from escalating. They don't outnumber us, but they sure don't want us to outnumber them any more than we already do. So they give us a warning. If you watch the Simpsons, you will see that most of those warnings are word for word, exactly what happens later. So the latest thing that was brought out on the internet was that the fact that our stores would be out of food for decades, and they were not going to be able to stop it. So I thought, well, I wrote in my blog a notice to the worldwide matrix, which includes all governments, all corporations, stores, everything, churches. Every church, individual church, is a corporation. They have a president, vice president, secretary, and all that. They're for profit. We just do not know that. So I wrote a notice to them stating, since this ebook goes worldwide across the net, and it's in all languages, how do you know who has consented and not consented to your empty shelves theory? It went out. A few months later, it's even brought up by one of those channelers who said that once in the last couple of months, Biden was going to go to Syria and a couple of other countries over in the East for meetings. But before he got a chance, people in those countries stormed their capitals and said there will be no meeting with Biden. This shows that if we stand up on our hind legs and not consent, they can't do it because they will get the karma. That law states, if you don't have the people's consent, you get the karma for harming them. But if you have their consent, the karma you would experience is directed straight to them. So we have been experiences in these wars, the karma they created, the effect of the war they created, and the effect of the karma they would have gotten if we hadn't consented. Yet we didn't know about the consent rule. So now it looks like we've got an example of what happens when we consent, when we are united They like us to be conformed. There's a difference between consent and conform. Consent means go along, go with the flow. Conform, no, I'm sorry. Conforming means go with the flow. Consent means that we will accept what you say. And that's what we've been doing. We've been consenting. But as united people, we unite in spirit, not in outcome. So they want us conformed. Now, where else did I go in my book? Oh, I did mention in the book about one country in the East, and I can't think of the name. I keep having trouble with that. It's going to come to me, but this doctor performed an autopsy on someone supposedly who died from the COVID. And he found that he had died from clogged arteries from bacteria that had been affected by some frequencies, and they were clogged up, and he died. So what he did was he thinned the blood of 20,000 people or so who were in the hospital for COVID. And in a week or two, they all went home well with aspirin and a few other things that thins the blood, that stopped bacteria from, or stopped the effect of their ventilators, because they are given thousands of dollars to convince people that these people in the hospitals died from the COVID. They even gave money to the people who died, to the doctors who had people dying from car accidents, called it COVID. It was no more flu since the COVID started, because people normally got the flu from the temperature, from the environment, from their weaknesses in their immune systems. They always got the flu in certain times. Well, they made that now the COVID. And during COVID, there were no flu incidences. Isn't that strange? So there's a lot of coincidences that prove to us that we've been deceived. So in this blog, I got to thinking, we need to have them debut all our truths as false. And they won't do that. They did it at one point when people, like what I did at one time, was seeking sovereignty, and they even gave a package out based on the fact that they did not answer these questions. They just, I can't think of the word now. Anyway, they didn't answer. They just gave the sovereignty so that they wouldn't have to admit that they were fraudulent. So it all came down to, like in the key of the globe being the downfall of the church, which hasn't occurred yet, but the key to the sovereignty of every person has to be questioned. We're sovereign. No man's law or no man can take away sovereignty. Even the people working for the Matrix are sovereign. Even people who have signed contracts to be corporate people, like in Washington, D.C., the 10 square miles. That was created so the country could have funds to run on. So they had income tax for those people. Well, they decided that, well, look, if we get income tax from all the people in the world, we'll have a lot more money to spend creating our dynasty, their commercial world, their industry. So with the Bible, with the birth certificate and Social Security, an insurance claim, they gave every person a treasury account in Washington, D.C. We are the beneficiary. The trustee is the electric company, the government, anyone who has your Social Security number and your signature can get money from your treasury account, which is in the millions and billions of dollars, because when you're born, it's worth over $1 million. They created it this way so they could use it to work off of us. Money does not transfer. They do it by discharging and charging. Whenever you're picked up by an officer, you give him your driver's license. Now he has your Social Security number and your signature. Now he's your trustee. Now he is in trust fraud. But they covered themselves by saying fraud they cannot be convicted of fraud because there's other ways that we can get what we need. But that's fraud within itself. And so with this idea of fraud and this idea of our sovereignty, I came up with the thought that we're all sovereign. The government is not over us. Nothing can be over a sovereign person. The government itself, if it were the original that it started, still wouldn't be sovereign over us. Even the fiction that it is now is not sovereign over us. The court cases, they're not about a traffic fine. They make it look that way. And if you know what you're doing, you can settle it out of court back in there whenever you have them buy your bond for you. The court is yours. And I've learned a lot of that stuff, but I just couldn't bring myself to memorize it because it made me so sick. There are people who memorize it. They get on the internet and they tell you almost all of it, but not all. They would be taken out. So I have brought out the fact that we're sovereign. It's on the book. It's already in the blog. It doesn't matter what I say now. It's out. And we are sovereign. They have no authority over us. They have no jurisdiction over us. They are maritime courts. They have no venue on land. Even if they put their courthouse on a street named after some body of water, that does not make them sovereign. That does not make them any different than maritime law. All you have to do is just let them know you're not going to go into their maritime court with the tassels on the flag, advertising that they resolve problems between people who have contracts with each other. Our Congress gave these courts the authority to adjudicate between two people who have a contract with each other. That's all they've got. That's the only authority they have. Not statutes and government policy and police policies. All our words. There was a Gordon Maxwell who had a video that tells all the words and how you can tell by the words everything that's actually happening. And at the end of his video, somebody says, well, what's our answer? He says, this will never be resolved. The best thing for us to do is educate ourselves in the way they use their words and their legalese and all their rules and all their procedures. Hey, it makes you sick to